the third week of our Imagine series, and we've been talking about imagining life the way that God has intended and created and designed us for, and imagining, becoming and doing and experiencing and the understanding the fullness of life as God has intended for you and for me. Today I want to talk to you in our third week of this series. I want to talk to you about this thought that I am a game changer. Look at the person next to you and say, he's talking about me. Go ahead. It's right. It's personal this morning. And if you're new to Shoreline Community Church, inside your bulletin, there's a white piece of paper there. And I didn't do it on both sides. I didn't mess up this week. I paid attention to what I was doing. And in there's that white piece of paper, and you can fill in the blanks as we go along. One of our ushers would love to get a pen for you if you need a pen this morning. We provide that to you. But I'm a game changer. Sometimes we think of, okay, God can use the church, God can use that person, God can use another person to change the world, but what about me? Well, I want to talk to you about that this morning. Me, I am a game changer. Now, I want you to imagine with me. Imagine with me that you're a parent, and you're about to have your third, fourth, fifth, sixth baby, I don't know, whatever, right? You're about to have that child, and you realize suddenly that you're all out of love, right? Imagine that you've reached your love quotient. That's it, folks. This child being born into a family that mistakenly thought they had enough love, but tragically, we miscalculated our love quotient. This baby is going to be unloved. Now imagine if that were possible, right? If that were possible, wouldn't we have to come up with some type of test that would clue us in as to what our individual love percentage, or ILP for short, was? When we would have to come up with some kind of test for that, because let's be honest, it would be a terrible thing to have children or attend a family reunion or to be a guest on Steve Harvey's daytime TV show and realize that you are out of love, just out of love. I mean, we joke about it, but somewhere in the back of our minds, way in the recesses that we never talk about, we unconsciously worry about this. We wonder, don't we, if we have enough love? Of course not. I mean, please, give me a break. What kind of an opening is that? That was like the worst sermon opening ever in the history of the world, and you guys all sat here and listened to it. I mean, are you kidding me? Nobody here is worried about running out of love. Not one person in this room has ever lost sleep at night going, I don't think I'll love anymore tomorrow. It's never happened. There's something in all of us that could have 30 kids. Now, we might not know all of their names, but we would love them. Like, you're my kid, right? Oh, I love you. There's something about us that never runs out of love. You should have seen all of the looks on your face like, yes, I do worry about that. I'd like to share with you today where that comes from and what it means to every one of us as Christ followers. This morning, this is my point. We have infinite love because we are loved with an infinite love. Let me say that again. We have infinite love because we've been loved with an infinite love. We've experienced infinite love. 1 John chapter 4, that's where we're going to clue in this morning. It's where we're going to focus in this morning. 1 John chapter 4, verse 7 says this, Dear friends, let us continue to love one another, for love comes from where? Love comes from God. In your notes this morning, God is the originator of love. And ultimately, all love comes from Him. He is the genesis of love. He's the embodiment of love. Every bit of love, every outgrowth, every demonstration of love ultimately comes from the heart of and the person of God. Now, have you ever considered this before? I mean, have you ever, I don't know if you all, maybe it's because I'm a pastor, but every so often I'll sit down and I'll have these big theological thoughts, right? And I think, wow, God is love. Wow, that's deep. You ever have thoughts like that? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever considered this before? Have you ever wondered where love comes from? I mean, think about this. No one has ever had to teach you how to love. Love is natural. Hate, on the other hand, is taught. It's passed down. Ultimately, it's unnatural. Though it's part of fallen man, it's not part of our default settings. Nelson Mandela talked about this. He said this, people must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Man's goodness, he goes on to say, is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. I mean, even the hardest, most callous person has the capacity to love somebody. Hitler had Eva Braun. Osama bin Laden had at least 3 wives and more than 20 children. Nero, one of the most despicable people who's ever walked the face of the earth. Nero poisoned, beheaded, stabbed, burned, boiled, crucified, and impaled people, mostly Christians and, his family members. But even he loved Sabina Popia. This is a sign of our Creator's work in each of us. We are assured that God's DNA, if you will, exists in each of us because we have the capacity to love. I want you to know this morning that God is the originator of love. Verses 9 and 10 of our text says this, God showed how much he loved us by sending his one and only Son into the world that we might have eternal life through him. Verse 10, this is real love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as a sacrifice to take away our sins. This morning in your notes, real love, I want you to catch this. Real love, it can't be hidden. Real love can't be hidden. How many of you have ever seen the Brad Pitt movie, Legends of the Fall? Come on, admit it. Go ahead, raise your hands. I just want to see. Okay, yeah, that's it? It's a good movie. Not my type of movie normally, but Legends of the Fall is a must-see movie. If for no other reason than it has Sir Anthony Hopkins in it, okay? Because if Anthony Hopkins is in it, he's just good, okay? Let's be honest. But in this movie, there's 3 brothers, right? And these 3 brothers ultimately fall in love with the same woman. But the one brother that she loves is the one that she can never have. Now, like I said, I'm not usually into these kind of movies, but just follow along with me, okay? The first brother, his name's Samuel, and same guy who played Elliot in E.T. It's kind of weird, but right? So, first brother Samuel is engaged to this woman, and her name is Susanna. But Samuel is tragically killed in the First World War. Now, Alfred, the second brother, is a smart choice for her. If she's going to choose between the other 2 brothers, which one to fall in love with and marry, Alfred would be the smart choice. He's dependable, he's measured, and he offers security to Susanna. While Tristan, who of course is played by Brad Pitt, right? He's wild and adventurous. So much so that he abandons his friends and families for years at a time to travel the world and experience some of these amazing adventures. And of course, right, Susanna falls in love with Tristan. But Tristan, being Tristan, leaves her behind for a number of years to pursue one of his travels. And while he's away, she finally decides to marry Alfred, the steady guy, right? The man with ambitions and goals. And then there comes the big scene, right? If you've ever watched a movie, you know this scene, right? It's the scene where Tristan comes back from his ventures. He's been gone for years and years. He doesn't tell anybody he's coming home, but he comes home, right? And he's there, and the inevitable happens. He and Susanna see each other for the first time that he's back, right? And they can't look away from each other quickly enough. They're caught by her now husband, Alfred, and that awkward moment can't be dismissed. I mean, after all, this is real love. And real love can't be hidden. No matter how much you try to deny it or suppress it, real love always surfaces. Real love can't be hidden. It's the look in a parent's eye. It's the way two lovers talk to one another. It's the way you care for someone that you really, really love. In the same way that we can't hide our love for one another, God's love for us could not be hidden either. He loved you and me so much that he had to make it known in grand fashion. He wanted us to know how great his love is for us. And with that in mind, he sent his son to do what we couldn't do for ourselves. He sent his son to die for our sins. Christ was the victim of our offenses. Sin is what keeps mankind from experiencing intimate relationship with God the Father. Yes, before Jesus, mankind had a relationship with God, but it wasn't close. It was always from a distance. And that was because the sin problem was never dealt with completely. There were sacrifices in the Old Testament which covered man's sins, but it didn't remove man's sins. When Christ died on the cross, our sin was taken away, which affords us, you and me, a close relationship with God. Now, what I'm saying is that God loved us so much, he was willing to make the grandest gesture of all by paying the greatest price of all as a demonstration for his love for you and me. I want you to know this morning that real love can't be hidden. Real love always reveals itself. Verse 11 says this, dear friends, since God has loved us that much, we surely ought to love one another. We love each other, in verse 19, because he first loved us. So my question to you this morning, number 3 in your notes, is this. What you doing? What you doing? Remember when you were a little kid, right? Or if you've ever watched teachers or children's workers work with little kids, right? And there's those two kids, they get in the fight, right? And they're like, right? And they're on the ground and one's like beating the other one or something like that, right? And the teacher pulls them apart, right? And you've seen this scene, haven't you? And the teacher pulls them apart, and what are you doing, Johnny? And what are you doing, Bobby? And what started this? And blah, blah, blah. And they go through the whole thing. And then the teacher goes, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to, they'll either do it on this level. I want you to shake hands with each other and say you're sorry. And they go, I'm sorry. Or, I'm sorry. Right? Doesn't have a lot of effect, does it? Why? Because you can't make someone love someone else. Now, same scene, the two kids get in a fight, right? The teacher takes the two kids and she puts them over in the corner together, right? Like 15 minutes later, you look over, those two kids are what? Laughing together, right? Sharing Snapchats because they're 4 years old and they have Snapchats now, right? And they're talking and they're giggling, and now Johnny and Bobby are best friends. How many of you, let me ask you, guys, I know guys, girls, it's just different. But guys, how many of you, and I did this, 8th grade, I got in a fight with a kid named Jason, right? And we ended up being best friends after that, right? How many guys here got in a fight with a guy and you were like best friends after that? Guys, yeah, right? So here's why. Once you put those two kids in that corner together, they have a shared experience. They are in prison together. Okay? They're two men against the system. They're fighting the world. Right? And eventually, they're going to start talking about how they're fighting the world and how the man's trying to keep them down. Right? They have shared experience. There's something that they bond over, and they begin to realize, they begin to realize that they have more in common than they have against each other. And all of a sudden, what starts off as hate ends up bonding them together. John kind of put us all in that corner together in this morning's text, especially as Christ followers. God loved us enough to come and die for us. And he's saying, shouldn't that compel us to love one another? In other words, you didn't deserve God's great gift of love, and I'm in the same boat, he says here. I don't deserve it either. So John's kind of saying, let's swap lunch items together today because we're best buddies now. You can have my Twinkies, I get your ho-hos. Because we're in this together. We're friends now. We're all sinners. We all deserve eternal separation from God. Every single one of us, he says, is without excuse. So why would I withhold love from you if I've been given such an amazing outpouring of love myself? Makes no sense. Defies explanation. Now, look at how John takes this even further. Verses 20 and 21, it says, if someone says, I love God, but hates a fellow believer, that person is a liar. It's pretty strong language, isn't it? Liar. Right? Liar! John says, for if we don't love people we can see, how can we love God whom we cannot see? He goes on to say this, and he's given us this command, those who love God must also love their fellow believers. Now, if you're like me, then you have to wonder, how can I love everyone? Right? I mean, aren't there just people that you don't get along with? People who have hurt you, abused you? How in the world could God expect me to love them? Now this, church, this is where we get to change the narrative. This is how we change the world. We love when it doesn't make sense. We love when it's inconvenient. We love when it hurts. How? I mean, how can I love everyone, even those I don't care for, those who have hurt or abused or offended me? How can I love them? You can't on your own. But you can when the love of God is at work in you. Because you have been given infinite love, you have the capacity to love infinitely. In the same way you don't run out of love for your kids, no matter how many you have, or your grandkids, or your stepkids, or your nieces, or your nephews, and your aunts, and your uncles, and those co-workers that have come into your life, and that next door neighbor who you've gotten to know. In the same way you don't run out of love for them, guess what? You have the capacity to love others. The unlovely, the ones who hurt you, the downtrodden, the mean, the nasty, the hate-filled ones that wish you dead. When the love of God is at work fully in you, you have the capacity, the unlimited capacity to love the unlovable too. I'll tell you a story this morning. She embraced him, thanked him, held his hand, and forgave him. Holocaust survivor Eva Kor had waited 70 years for a moment such as this. And now, at last, she was face to face with the former SS man on trial for his alleged part in the slaughter of Auschwitz. Oscar Groening looked startled at first, then he smiled. He placed a kiss on her cheek and listened to the words of the 81-year-old woman who, with her twin sister, was once the subject of Josef Mengel's monstrous human experiments. The extraordinary moment of reconciliation took place as the 93-year-old former death camp clerk, known as the bookkeeper of Auschwitz, prepared to listen to Mrs. Kor's evidence in trial that could condemn him to die in jail. She claims Groening was so overwhelmed by her unexpected gesture that he literally fainted. Now, Mrs. Kors was criticized by other victims and their families for her public forgiveness. Not only criticism, she said, they called me a traitor. But she explained, as long as we understand my forgiveness, that the victim has the right to be free. You cannot be free from what was done to you unless you remove from your shoulder the daily burden of pain and anger and forgive the Nazis. Not because they deserve it, but because I deserve it. She goes on to say, I don't forget what they've done to me, but I'm not a poor person. I'm a victorious woman who has been able to rise above the pain and forgive the Nazis. When she approached him before the hearing, she held her arms outstretched towards his, and this most unlikely pair became locked in an embrace. How can anyone demonstrate love for another under those circumstances? Where does love like that come from? Where does it originate from? God. God has loved us despite our wickedness and shame, despite all our flaws and despicable actions. He loves us. How? Because love comes from God. He's the embodiment and the originator of love. You and I change the world every time we choose love. Every time we forgive. Every time we choose healing over getting even. When we become agents of peace rather than chaos and hatred. And it starts here in the community of faith. So my challenge to you this morning is this: let's be game changers. Let's choose to love when it's easier and more convenient to hate. Let's choose forgiveness when holding a grudge would be our regular course of action. Why? Because others deserve it? No. Because we deserve it. And because Christ has shown us a better way. Let's change the game. Let's change the world by demonstrating the same infinite love that has been given to us. I close with this quote from Mother Teresa. She says, "I have found the paradox that if you love until it hurts, there can be no more hurt, only more love."